The morning sun had barely cracked the horizon when Mark Holloway first heard Karen Peterson's cutting remarks. He was standing on his front lawn, coffee mug in hand, pretending not to listen as she critiqued every inch of his property to her walking companion. "Look at that mailbox," Karen's voice carried like a sharp knife through the crisp suburban air. "It's an absolute eyesore. How can someone live with such a disgraceful piece of metal just sitting there at the edge of their perfectly manicured lawn?" Mark's fingers tightened around his ceramic mug, the porcelain threatening to crack under the pressure. He purchased that mailbox 5 years ago, a simple, functional black metal box that had served him perfectly well. It wasn't flashy, sure, but it was reliable, just like Mark himself. For 27 years, Mark had been the most predictable resident of Maple Grove Estates. A mid-level software engineer who worked from home, he was known for his meticulously maintained lawn, his punctual bill payments, and his absolute commitment to avoiding confrontation. Neighbors knew him as the quiet guy who nodded politely but rarely engaged in small talk. But something inside Mark snapped that morning. Karen Peterson wasn't just any neighborhood busybody. She was the self-appointed president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, a position she wielded like a dictatorial scepter. Her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer walking outfit were as much a uniform of authority as any official badge. She made it her personal mission to ensure every home in the neighborhood met her exacting standards of aesthetic perfection. Mark watched as Karen and her walking companion, equally well-dressed woman in her 60s, continued their critique tour. He could hear every dismissive comment, each carefully enunciated word designed to cut deeper than the last. "I mean, Robert," Karen said to her companion, loud enough for Mark to hear. "Some people simply have no sense of community pride. That mailbox looks like it was picked up from a clearance bin at a discount hardware store." What Karen didn't know was that Mark was not your typical quiet neighbor. Beneath his unassuming exterior beat the heart of a mechanical engineer with a passion for robotics that he'd suppressed for years. His home office was a carefully hidden workshop of half-finished projects, intricate mechanical designs, and components that most people would consider junk. And now Karen had awakened something in him. Mark's lips curled into a smile that was equal parts mischief and determination. If Karen wanted a mailbox that would make a statement, he would give her a mailbox that would become the talk of the entire neighborhood. Not just a box, but a technological marvel that would challenge everything she thought she knew about suburban aesthetics. By the time Karen completed her morning walk and disappeared around the corner, Mark had already opened his laptop and begun sketching. The first draft of what would become the most extraordinary mailbox in suburban history was about to take shape. Little did Karen know she had just inadvertently launched the most elaborate, complex, and utterly ridiculous revenge plan in the history of neighborhood disputes. Mark Holloway was going to build a mailbox that would be remembered for generations. The next 48 hours transformed Mark's home office into a war room of mechanical engineering. Sketches covered every available surface, complex diagrams of servo motors, intricate joint mechanisms, and increasingly elaborate owl designs. His normally pristine workspace now looked like the love child of a robotics lab and an ornithological research center. Mark's first step was research. He spent hours studying barn owl anatomy, watching documentaries, and analyzing mechanical movement videos. He wasn't just building a mailbox, he was creating a living, breathing mechanical tribute to one of nature's most perfect predators. By midnight of the second day, he'd already sourced components that would make most robotics engineers drool. A set of high-precision servo motors from a decommissioned automotive assembly line. Lightweight carbon fiber panels salvaged from an experimental drone project. Silicone-based skin mimicking material typically used in advanced prosthetics. His brother David, a mechanical engineer who worked for a robotics firm in Silicon Valley, thought Mark had finally lost his mind when he called for advice. "Let me get this straight," David said, his voice crackling through the speakerphone. "You're building a giant animatronic owl because a neighborhood Karen criticized your mailbox?" Mark's response was matter-of-fact, precisely engineered revenge. "David, this isn't just a mailbox. This is a statement. The owl would be massive, nearly 6 feet tall when fully extended. Its wingspan would stretch over 8 feet, with intricate feather detailing that could ruffle, move, and respond to environmental stimuli. Mark planned motion sensors that would trigger different behaviors. A slow, menacing head turn when someone approached, eyes that could change from a soft amber to a piercing predatory yellow, and micro-movements that would make the creature seem unnervingly alive. Most impressive was the technical complexity. Mark designed a multi-layered control system that would make the owl responsive yet unpredictable. It wouldn't just be a static display, it would be a living, breathing mechanical creature that would both terrify and mesmerize anyone who approached. The mailbox itself would be ingeniously integrated into the owl's body. A cleverly disguised compartment in the chest would open with a precise, almost theatrical mechanism, hydraulics ensuring smooth, silent operation. When the mail was delivered, the owl's chest would part like a high-tech armor reveal, then seamlessly close again. "This is beyond revenge," Mark muttered to himself as he calibrated a particularly complex joint mechanism. "This is performance art." By the end of the second day, the skeleton of his mechanical masterpiece was taking shape. Carbon fiber bones, precision-engineered joints, and a complex network of hydraulic and electrical systems were slowly transforming from abstract design to tangible reality. Karen Peterson had no idea what was coming. What started as a casual, cutting remark about a simple mailbox was about to unleash a technological marvel that would redefine suburban expectations forever. The Maple Grove Homeowners Association meeting was Mark's first real test. Normally, he would have avoided such gatherings like the plague, but this time was different. He needed intelligence, and Karen Peterson always dominated these monthly assemblies. Dressed in his most nondescript khakis and polo shirt, Mark slipped into the community center's meeting room. The space buzzed with the usual suburban drama, complaints about lawn heights, trash can placement, and the eternal debate about street parking. Karen sat at the head of the table, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, reading glasses perched dramatically on the tip of her nose. "Now," she announced with the authority of a small-town dictator, "we need to discuss the increasing number of unsightly mailboxes in our community." Mark had to suppress a smile. The meeting dragged on, with Karen presenting a color-coded slideshow of offensive mailboxes. Each image was met with collective gasps and disapproving murmurs from the assembled neighbors. Standard suburban theater at its finest. But it was the moment Karen lingered on a slide of his current mailbox that Mark's resolve hardened. "This," she said, pointing to a photo of his simple black mailbox, "is an absolute affront to our community standards. It's utilitarian, dated, and frankly, an embarrassment to Maple Grove Estates." A ripple of agreement swept through the room. What they didn't know was that Mark was gathering more than just motivation. He was taking mental notes of every technical specification Karen might appreciate. Precision, aesthetics, innovation. Each critique was another design parameter for his mechanical masterpiece. After the meeting, Mark intercepted Robert, Karen's walking companion from the other day, in the parking lot. Robert was a retired aerospace engineer, and Mark knew he'd be the perfect source of additional technical insights. "Quite a meeting," Mark said casually, falling into step with Robert. Robert chuckled. "Karen does love her presentations. What did you think about the mailbox discussion?" Mark chose his words carefully. "I'm working on something that might change how we think about mailboxes entirely." Robert's engineering curiosity was instantly piqued. They spent the next 30 minutes discussing mechanical design, with Robert offering subtle suggestions about advanced servomechanisms and lightweight materials. By the time Mark returned home, his notebook was filled with new ideas. The owl was evolving from a revenge project to a genuine engineering marvel. That night, as he worked in his home office, Mark's computer screens flickered with complex 3D models, servo motor specifications, hydraulic pressure calculations, feather movement algorithms. Each line of code, each mechanical diagram was a calculated step toward his ultimate goal. Karen wanted perfection. He would give her perfection, with wings, sensors, and a level of technological sophistication that would make her jaw drop. The owl was no longer just a mailbox. It was becoming a statement. A technological sculpture that would redefine the very concept of suburban infrastructure. The first major challenge came 3 weeks into the project. Mark had successfully created the owl's skeletal structure and most of its internal mechanisms, but the skin, the crucial element that would transform his mechanical marvel from a robotic frame to a lifelike creature, was proving problematic. Standard silicone wouldn't work. It would crack, fade, and fail to capture the intricate details of a real owl's feathering. Mark needed something revolutionary. Enter Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a materials engineer Mark knew from a previous conference. She worked at an advanced biomimetics lab that specialized in creating synthetic materials that mimicked natural textures and movements. Their last collaboration had been a minor project involving adaptive camouflage materials, but Mark knew she was exactly the person who'd solve his feather problem. "You want to do what?" Elena asked, staring at Mark's detailed schematics during a video call. Mark explained his vision. A synthetic skin that could move, ruffle, and respond to environmental stimuli. A material that wasn't just a covering, but an integral part of the owl's interactive design. To his surprise, Elena was intrigued rather than dismissive. "This is actually brilliant," she muttered, zooming in on his diagrams. "We've been developing microhydraulic skin membranes for medical prosthetics. Your owl could be the perfect external test case." 2 weeks and several experimental prototypes later, Mark had something extraordinary. A synthetic skin composed of thousands of individual, independently movable feathers created from a revolutionary polymer blend. Each feather could move, adjust its angle, and respond to temperature, wind, and proximity sensors. The neighborhood had no idea what was coming. Mark's brother David flew in for a critical review. A senior robotics engineer himself, David was both Mark's harshest critic and most supportive ally. He spent an entire weekend examining every component, running simulations and stress testing mechanisms. "It's insane," David said, shaking his head. "But it might actually work." The owl was becoming more than just a mailbox. It was a statement, a technological sculpture that challenged everything the suburban landscape represented, precision engineering meeting artistic rebellion. Mark had long stopped thinking about Karen Peterson. This was no longer about revenge. This was about pushing the boundaries of what was possible. By the end of the fourth week, the owl was 70% complete. Its skeleton gleamed with precision machine components. The skin prototype was functioning beyond Mark's wildest expectations. When he ran initial movement tests, the owl looked less like a machine and more like a living, breathing creature. Late one night, as hydraulic systems whispered and servo motors hummed their precise song, Mark realized he had created something far beyond a simple mailbox. This was art. This was engineering. This was a declaration of individual creativity in a world that demanded conformity. Karen Peterson wanted standardization. Mark Holloway was about to show her the meaning of extraordinary. Rumors began to circulate through Maple Grove Estates. Whispers of strange noises coming from Mark Holloway's property. Glimpses of something massive being constructed behind his carefully maintained privacy fence. The neighborhood was buzzing with speculation. Karen Peterson, ever the information gatherer, had her network of informants. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down reported hearing mechanical whirring late at night. Old Tom, who walked his dog past Mark's house each morning, swore he'd seen something moving behind the fence, something big, something that didn't look quite natural. But Mark was meticulous about his secrecy. The final stages of the owl's construction happened under carefully controlled conditions. Blackout curtains covered his workshop windows. He even installed a white noise generator to mask any telltale mechanical sounds. The community's annual summer block party became an unexpected proving ground. Mark knew Karen would be there, holding court among the neighborhood alike. He used the event as a strategic reconnaissance mission, carefully observing the dynamics, listening to conversations, and gathering final pieces of inspiration for his masterpiece. As neighbors mingled on perfectly manicured lawns, sharing potato salad and gossip, Mark noticed something he'd missed before. It wasn't just Karen's critique that bothered him. It was the suffocating conformity of the entire neighborhood. Every house looked almost identical. Every lawn was perfectly trimmed. Every mailbox was a carbon copy of its neighbor. His owl was going to change all of that. The final week of construction was a marathon of precision engineering. Mark barely slept, living on a diet of energy drinks and takeout. His brother David flew back to help with the final calibrations, bringing with him some advanced sensor technology from his own lab. "This is beyond anything we've ever done," David muttered, carefully integrating a complex array of environmental response systems. "It's like we're creating a living machine." Mark's design had evolved far beyond a simple mailbox. The owl would do more than just store mail. It would interact. It would respond. It would challenge every concept of suburban infrastructure. Thermal sensors would detect approaching humans. Microphones would pick up sounds from hundreds of feet away. The owl's head would track movement with uncanny precision. Its eyes, specially designed LED arrays behind advanced optical systems, would change color and intensity based on environmental conditions and proximity. When the postal truck approached, the owl would come alive in a way no mailbox had ever done before. Its chest would open with a hydraulic whisper. Mail would be accepted with a mechanical grace that bordered on the theatrical. But Mark knew the real moment of truth would come when Karen Peterson first laid eyes on his creation. As the final component clicked into place, Mark stepped back and looked at his creation. What had started as an act of petty revenge had transformed into something miraculous, a technological marvel that defied explanation, a statement against suburban mediocrity. The owl was ready, and Maple Grove Estates would never be the same.